Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the person who shares your bed, the person you trust the most. Olivia never imagined that a moment like that would change the way she looked at her life. She had always thought the world outside her office windows held the fiercest battles. She fought corruption, sat through long hearings, negotiated with men who wore the kind of suits that made them think they were untouchable. She thought her strength at work would be enough to carry her home life. But strength at work does not always protect a person at home. That night would teach her that. Olivia was known at the office for being exact and calm. She arrived early, stayed late, and handled each file like it was a person depending on her. Her colleagues respected her for it. Her children loved her for it. Emma, her 8-year-old daughter, would draw pictures of Olivia at her desk with a tall stack of papers and a tiny crown on her head. Noah, 6, would save his best crayon for his mother's finger when she came to pick him up, insisting only she could use it. Those small, ordinary things kept Olivia going when meetings ran long and nights became short. At home, Alexander gave the right impression. He carried a casual charm that looked effortless when they walked into dinner parties. He clapped when she spoke at events. He smiled when neighbors praised them. He told people how proud he was of Olivia's work. He watched her as she worked with that look some men wore when they were certain they had chosen perfectly. Yet all of that admiration felt thin when Olivia turned the page from public life to private. In the quiet of their home, he began to complain more often about the hours she kept. He started mentioning the dinners she had missed, the bedtime stories he had told, the school plays he had attended in her stead. At first, Olivia thought those complaints were loneliness dressed as anger. She thought a kind conversation would ease it. She tried to make more space in her calendar, to catch the small things she had missed. But her boss asked one more favor, one more meeting, and the tide kept pulling her back to work. She noticed the little changes in Alexander, like women notice early storms. The perfume that lingered on his jacket once in a while. The phone he flipped away when she entered the room. The time he would step out saying, "Just a minute," and return, with his smile a little too bright. She wanted to believe in him. She wanted to keep the image of their marriage intact for the children. But trust once shaken is a strange animal. It doesn't easily lie down. Olivia found herself watching him now the way she watched witnesses in court looking for small tells. He had them. A week before the day that changed everything, Olivia had an unexpectedly light evening. She closed her files earlier than planned and decided, simply, to be home. She wanted to read Emma's newly finished schoolbook, to laugh at Noah's small jokes, to sit at the dinner table without another person, waiting on the phone call from a ministry. It felt like a gift, private and vital. When she walked into the living room, Alexander was already there, arms crossed, leaning against the window, a plate of snacks in front of him and a book open, except he wasn't reading it. He looked up with a smile that seemed rehearsed. He kissed her forehead in the way they'd done early in marriage, warm and familiar. For a breath, Olivia let herself inhale that small normalcy. Then she walked past him into the kitchen, and in the drawer, her hand brushed the edge of paper she hadn't seen before. A receipt. A hotel receipt. One line for a suite. The date stamped in her mind the same night he'd claimed he had an important meeting. Her fingers tightened around the paper. Her heart did the slow, terrible detective work that truth often forces a woman to do. The receipts. The times, the late hours where they met. She stood in the kitchen with plastic light above her head and felt the room tilt slightly, as if gravity had shifted. She did not accuse him there. She placed the paper back, folded as if nothing had happened, and went into the living room to sit down with him. She asked about his day in the same, even voice she used with callers on difficult files. He gave a non-committal answer. Just a thing with a client. When she smiled, His eyes flicked away in a way that made something inside her sink. Olivia did not confront then because she had learned to choose battles with caution. Accusation without proof is a crude instrument. It breaks as often as it lands. She knew a war needed strategy. She had won fights at work by building cases and presenting unassailable facts. She would take that skill home. Quietly, she began to collect small notes in the privacy of her desk, timestamps in a lined notebook, a list of excuses matched against actual sightings. But that notebook remained folded in her bag, private and burning. The first real proof came like a doorbell on an ordinary day. Olivia walked out of the ministry building and across the street. The glass window of a well-known restaurant held a scene she could not unsee. Alexander, leaning close to another woman, his hand touching the back of her chair in a movement more intimate than a friend's. They laughed at something she said, and he leaned in the way husbands leaned in toward their wives when secrets were shared. The world around Olivia seemed to hush. Traffic lights changed. People passed, and she stayed frozen at the curb, as if witnessing the precise moment a familiar map has been redrawn under her feet. The woman was younger, self-possessed, dressed with small luxury that said money and indifference. When Alexander looked at her for a second, his face had an easy warmth Olivia had not seen in him for a long time. She did not cross the street. She never made dramatic scenes. She had watched too many lives shatter faster than the storm she felt behind that window. She drove away, the city lights blurring into one steady smear as she held the image close. That night she did not sleep. She lay awake until the dawn made a thin line across the curtains and counted the outlines of her children's faces in dreams. In the weeks that followed, Alexander's behavior hardened. He began to speak of her absence to their children in a way that wasn't casual. "Your mother works very hard," he would say casually at breakfast, then lower his voice as if offering a secret. "She sometimes has to make tough choices. Seated like this, a child's understanding can be rearranged." He started taking them on trips he called fun days, posting their pictures in frames on his social accounts, always with the same proud smile. Neighbors commented on how present he seemed. Friends congratulated him quietly on his parenting. It was a cruel, public preview of the case he was building. Olivia's phone buzzed constantly now, but not just with work. Her lawyer's number appeared more often on the screen. She kept her notes under the lock in her desk and asked no one about what she knew. Her mother called sometimes and said, "You must rest." Olivia would tell her, "I am fine. I'll be home soon." The words tasted like ash. The night the children shifted closer to Alexander in a way that felt deliberate, Olivia felt something inside her break and mend at once. She had been at a late session and came home exhausted. The house smelled like stew and lemon. Toys lay scattered across the floor like a city of small lives. She walked into the living room and found Alexander with Emma drawing on his lap while Noah pushed cars along the carpet. Her presence sliced through the tableau. Emma looked up and waved, sweet and unknowing. Noah reached toward her with sticky fingers. But then their vanishing small hesitations told her more than their waving hands. The warmth of their greeting had a reservation built into it. They ran back with one last look at Alexander, who offered her a smile that was almost victorious. A week later, a legal envelope arrived at her office, a folded document that seemed impossible, a petition for custody. Alexander had filed while she was at work, while she had been saving a fund for Emma's piano lessons and Noah's school trip. The letters on that page were not just ink. They were a legal knife. He accused her of being too engaged in her professional responsibilities to provide stable, day-to-day care. As the paper stated coldly, he noted frequent travels and unpredictable hours. He had framed her sacrifice as a failing. He had turned her strength into a weapon and pointed it at her heart. When she read those words, Olivia's hands shook. She sat down against the wall by her desk, the room suddenly too bright. She could have walked in and ripped the sheets out of his life then, screamed and accused. But she thought of her children. She thought of Emma's drawings and Noah's small breathings in sleep. She realized rage had to be clean and purposeful. She folded the papers slowly, put them in a secured folder, and sent a message to her lawyer: "We will fight. I want the evidence." Her finger hovered over the send button, then pushed it. Each second of that movement, like dropping a stone into a still pond and watching ripples spread outward. Court was a different kind of pressure. Olivia sat in the hearing room with her lawyer by her side and felt the world narrow to the scrape of her chair, legs, and the judge's steady voice. Alexander sat across, speaking soft lines about devotion, about how he had stepped up while she pursued a public service. He had a prepared face for the judges, one that made decisions easier, for men who learned to speak with calm authority in offices. He presented photos he had taken on family days, images, plucked for their brightness, and pointed to the missed school events as evidence. The judge listened, and sometimes the judge's pen tapped in a way that sounded like a coming verdict. Olivia felt cold, not because of the room's air, but because the whole of her life was being reduced to attendance, charts and schedules. Her lawyer argued her side readings about the work she did that would secure her children's future, the stability of her income, testimony from colleagues about her character. Yet there are arguments the law does not easily weigh against a child's immediate presence and daily small comforts. The judge offered a temporary arrangement, the kind that makes a home feel like rented space, shared custody for now, with a heavy emphasis on proving emotional availability. Olivia left the courtroom with only fragments of the children in her arms, handing them to Alexander at a visitation exchange with a smile that tasted like iron. She kissed Emma and Noah, held them close, and felt a kind of quiet rage rooted now in strategy rather than only pain. For the next days, she became methodical. Her nights were spent not only on reports but on quietly building an unassailable narrative. She learned to set aside emotion and to document with the care of an archivist. She photographed receipts she found in Alexander's pockets and matched them with the nights he'd claimed business meetings. She wrote down every odd phrase he used in front of the kids when he tried to convince them she was too busy. She asked a discreet private investigator to follow simple routes, to note names, to capture images not sensationalist tabloids, but clean, clear facts that a judge could not easily ignore. She changed small things at home, too. On the days she had the children, she made the dinners they liked and sat without a phone in hand, letting Noah draw on the tablecloth and Emma help with the potatoes. She became present in the small ways that recorders of childhood remember. She learned Noah's favorite lullaby after a week, and she sat with Emma during homework, asking questions that made the girl light up. She wanted this to be undeniable. She wanted the court's lens to see not only invoices and attendance, but a mother who was deliberately, steadfastly there. Alexander, strangely, did not sense the rising tide. He continued as if the world would remain as he'd arranged it, him the caregiver, her the busy one. He walked through the neighborhood, showing the children off to people who once asked about Olivia's absence and now nodded in sympathy for his single effort. He posted photos that showed him playing in the park or making pancakes, images that were carefully chosen to portray him as the parent always on time. He smiled in those pictures, the very smile Olivia had first loved. But the smile was smoother now, practiced, a public mask he thought safe. Then, one gray morning, a camera file arrived in Olivia's hands, a sequence of images the private investigator had taken. Alexander arriving at a hotel on a night the children were supposedly sleeping at home. Alexander checking into a suite with the same woman from the restaurant. The two leaving the next morning, Her arm looped into his as if they had always belonged together. The photos were clear, no grainy gossip fodder, just facts. Olivia spread them on the table and stared. She felt a strange ease then. The truth was a weight, yes, but once you set it down you can move. She made copies, marked dates, and placed them in an envelope labeled Court. The small kindnesses continued on the days she had the children. She bought Emma a small notebook she had been eyeing and took Noah to a story hour at the library. When the children were tucked in, she sat with the photos and receipts and made notes. She wrote long, steady notes for the lawyer, each line an attempt to convert a mother's living memory into the strict, undeniable language of law: times, dates, witnesses, proof of absence, and proof of infidelity. She wanted no loose ends. Thomas Paine once wrote that the blood of patriots nourishes freedom. Olivia thought then that precise records nourished justice. Weeks blurred into hearings and motions. Alexander tried to deflect with charm in the hearing room, but he could not explain away hotel bills and text records. He tried to explain the perfume on his jacket as a friend's perfume, but how many times could a friend explain the smell on a man's button? One by one, the carefully constructed excuses collapsed under the weight of the facts Olivia had arranged like bricks. During a particularly heavy hearing, the judge leaned forward and asked Alexander directly about the hotel receipts. His voice was neither harsh nor kind, only the tone of someone offering the accused the chance to be honest. That moment was when Alexander's practiced face faltered. Every man has a moment where the bottom falls out of the show he has been running, and Alexander hit that moment. He stammered, and the judge's hand tapped the table. The court asked for further investigation, and that recommendation was a blade that began to cut the ties Alexander relied upon. Outside the courtroom, a rumor began to spread, the whisper of scandal in small neighborhoods. People began to look at the family differently, some with pity, some with secret satisfaction, the gossip that is always swift when a stain appears on a public face. Olivia tried to ignore the hum of whispers that once would have broken her. But she also understood how perceptions fed into decisions. That was why she was careful to show up, to be present, to do the small things with purpose. A close friend at work, Maya, came over one evening with a thermos of tea and a quiet look. "You're doing it right," she said, placing the cup on the table. "He underestimates you." The words were small, but Maya's faith lit something inside Olivia. She had felt alone for weeks. Now she felt supported by someone who had seen the war she waged. They talked for hours about strategy that night. They spoke of witnesses, of supporting statements from teachers, and of the emotional harm children feel when a parent manipulates truth. In that conversation, Olivia felt less like a solitary fighter and more like a captain with an ally. Then came the day Alexander finally realized the ground beneath him was unstable. He walked into the hearing, expecting the routine, nods and the easy reassurances of a man who speaks well. Instead, he faced the stacked files Olivia had built: photo sequences, receipts with matching card transactions, small statements gathered from neighbors who had seen late-night arrivals, and more. The judge did not give a verdict yet, but the tone in the room had shifted. The judge made recommendations for supervised visits and psychological evaluations. The judge ordered the probe into financial transfers that suggested Alexander had been diverting funds away from the household budget to pay for trips and gifts. It was the start of a long process, but it was progress. It was the first time the law's tools turned toward the harm Olivia had documented. When she left the court that day, Olivia felt the tiredness in her bones, but also a stubborn warmth in her chest. She had grown from pain into purpose. She had learned how to turn heartbreak into a methodical test of truth. Her children clung to her when she returned home. Emma ran into her arms and Noel, small, mischievous, buried his face in her blouse. At night she sat beside Noah and read the lullabies that had been interrupted so many times by duty. At daybreak she prepared for another hearing, knowing the journey would be long. But for the first time in months, Hope felt like it had a foundation beneath it, built not on faith alone but on documents and witness accounts and the small, stubborn patterns of truth laid bare. She understood now that revenge, for her, was not a shout or a public humiliation or a scene staged for the neighbors. It was a long turning of a wheel that would bring justice into the open and protect the children she loved. Revenge would be quiet and precise and relentless. She would not let emotion lead. She would let facts do the work. She had no desire to destroy Alexander for the thrill of it. She wanted to stop his betrayal from hurting anyone further and to make sure her children grew up with honesty at the center of their lives. On a rainy afternoon, as she tucked Emma under a blanket, Olivia looked at her daughter's face, small and trusting, and felt that same cold vow rise once more. She whispered into the dark room, "We will be okay." It was not bravado. It was a plan. And just like plans, it would be executed, one factual step at a time. The days following the first hearing moved like storms through Olivia's life. Every morning she woke up in the same apartment she once shared with Alexander, but now it felt more like an empty cage. The walls seemed closer, the silence thicker. She would walk past the family pictures that still hung in the hallway, frames filled with forced smiles and long-forgotten promises. Her eyes always stopped at one picture where Alexander held their youngest daughter, smiling wide. That smile used to comfort her, but now it mocked her. It whispered lies. It reminded her how even a smile could be an act of betrayal. Olivia tried to remain strong for her children. Each morning she prepared their school bags, tied their shoelaces, kissed their foreheads. But she noticed the questions growing in their eyes. They could sense the tension, the quiet arguments that had turned into louder ones, the heavy air that clung to the house. Her eldest son once asked, "Mom, why doesn't Dad stay with us like before?" Olivia froze. She couldn't tell him the truth yet. Her voice cracked as she replied, "Sometimes people change. But no matter what, I'll always be here for you." Her son nodded, but his silence cut deeper than words. Meanwhile, Alexander played his role perfectly in front of the world. To outsiders, he was still the charming man, the successful husband, the devoted father. But in the shadows, he was tightening his grip. He whispered in the children's ears, painting Olivia as the one too busy for them, too consumed by her work. "Your mom loves her office more than you," he said one evening when he picked them up. Olivia wasn't there to defend herself. The children looked at him with doubt, their young minds absorbing poison drop by drop. One night, Olivia received a letter slipped under her apartment door. She bent down to pick it up, her hands trembling as if she already knew it carried more pain. Inside was a photograph. Alexander was sitting at a restaurant with another woman. Their heads leaned close, his hand resting over hers on the table. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't just friendship. The intimacy in their posture told the truth. Olivia's vision blurred, her knees weakened. She wanted to scream, to break everything around her. But instead, she pressed the photograph against her chest, her heart pounding with a fire that would no longer be contained. She realized now Alexander's betrayal wasn't limited to her. He wanted to take everything, her dignity, her children, her peace. And she could not allow that. She gathered the courage she had left and met her lawyer the next morning. Papers covered the desk documents, reports, financial records. Olivia's lawyer looked at her firmly. "We need evidence, Olivia. If he is truly unfit to keep the children, the court must see it. His affairs, his manipulation, his neglect. We must make the truth louder than his lies." Olivia nodded, her voice low but steady. "Then let's gather everything. I won't let him destroy me." Days turned into weeks, and the battle deepened. Olivia followed Alexander discreetly when he thought she was at work. She saw him leaving offices late at night, but instead of driving home, he drove to the same apartment building. Lights flickered from one of the windows, shadows moving inside. Olivia's chest tightened every time. She wanted to storm in, drag him out, scream at him in front of the world. But she stopped herself. Rage was useless without proof. So she took pictures. Each click of her camera was like a dagger, cutting through what remained of her love but sharpening her resolve for war. The next hearing came. The courtroom was filled with tension so thick it seemed to choke the air. Alexander entered first, his lawyer by his side, his expression calm, almost smug. Olivia walked in moments later, her face composed though her heart thundered inside her chest. The judge sat at the center, his eyes scanning both sides with a seriousness that weighed heavy on everyone present. The proceedings began, and Alexander's lawyer wasted no time. He painted Olivia as a woman obsessed with her work, a mother absent from her children's lives, a wife too distracted to nurture her home. His words were like arrows, sharp and calculated. Olivia clenched her fists under the table, her nails digging into her palms to stop her from breaking down. Then came her turn. Olivia's lawyer stood, voice calm but piercing. He placed photographs on the table, images of Alexander, at the restaurant with the woman, reports of nights he didn't return home, records of unexplained financial transactions. The courtroom murmured, whispers rising like waves crashing against stone. Alexander's face tightened, his calm mask beginning to crack. He tried to defend himself, raising his voice, denying the claims. "These are lies. Fabricated. She's desperate." But the judge silenced him, eyes narrowing. The balance was shifting. During a recess, Olivia walked out of the courtroom, her breath heavy, her body trembling. She leaned against the cold wall, her mind spinning. Suddenly, she heard a voice. It was the woman from the photograph, standing across the hall. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, silence screamed louder than words. The woman smirked, as if proud to be the reason for Olivia's pain. That smirk cut Olivia deeper than any blade. She turned away, swallowing her rage, but inside, something dark bloomed. This wasn't just about Alexander anymore. It was about every humiliation, every tear, every stolen moment of happiness. Revenge wasn't an option. It was her only path forward. The following nights, Olivia hardly slept. She spent hours writing notes, documenting every detail of Alexander's behavior. She spoke to neighbors, gathered testimonies, even found a colleague who had seen Alexander with the woman late at night. Piece by piece, she built a wall of evidence, strong enough to crush his lies. Her children noticed her exhaustion, her pale face, her tired eyes. One evening her daughter asked, "Mom, are we going to be okay?" Olivia hugged her tightly, whispering into her hair, "Yes, my love. We will be okay. I promise." That promise wasn't just for her daughter, it was a vow to herself. When the court resumed weeks later, Olivia was ready. She carried the file like a soldier carried a weapon. Her lawyer presented everything, each page heavier than the last. Alexander's defenses grew weaker, his voice louder, almost desperate. The judge listened carefully, noting each fact, each piece of evidence. Olivia sat still, her eyes fixed on Alexander. She no longer saw the man she married. She saw a stranger who had once worn a mask of love, a stranger who had betrayed her soul. And she knew she was winning. But Alexander wasn't ready to lose. That night, he showed up at her apartment, pounding on the door until she opened it. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice trembling with anger. "Do you think you can ruin me? Do you think you can take everything from me?" Olivia stood firm, her children asleep in the other room. "I don't have to ruin you, Alexander. You're doing that yourself." His hand twitched, as if he wanted to grab her, but he stopped. Something in her eye strength he never believed she had made him hesitate. He cursed under his breath and stormed away, slamming the door behind him. Olivia leaned against the door, her breath shaky, but her heart steady. She wasn't afraid anymore. The war was far from over. Alexander had money, connections, and arrogance that refused to die. But Olivia had something stronger: truth, determination, and the unbreakable bond of a mother fighting for her children. Each day became a battlefield, each night a silent war inside her chest. But with every passing moment, her fear faded, replaced by steel. She had lost her love, but in its ashes she found power. And now she would use that power to take everything back. That night Olivia sat in her small apartment, staring at the court documents spread across the table. The silence in the room felt heavier than ever before. Sometimes betrayal does not come from strangers, but from those who promise to stand with you for life. She had given everything to Alexander: her love, her trust, her loyalty. And in return, he had not only betrayed her heart with another woman, but was now trying to rip away her children too. The ticking of the wall clock echoed in the room. Every second felt like a reminder that time was slipping through her hands. Olivia closed her eyes, remembering the days when she believed her marriage was strong. Alexander used to call her his strength, his partner, his world. But those words had turned into lies, nothing more than shadows of a love that had once existed. Her heart ached as she thought of her children sleeping in Alexander's house, away from her. She had tucked them into bed every night since they were born, told them bedtime stories, kissed their foreheads. And now she could not even hold them. Alexander had filed for temporary custody, claiming Olivia's demanding government job made her an unfit mother. The pain of separation was sharper than any knife. She clenched her fists. No, she thought. He cannot win. I will not let him destroy me. The next morning, Olivia dressed in a plain black suit and walked into the courthouse. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she carried her file close to her chest. The air smelled of polished wood and old paper. People rushed around her: lawyers, parents, officers. But Olivia walked with steady steps, her eyes straight, her face calm. In the waiting area, she saw Alexander sitting comfortably in an expensive suit. His arm was casually resting on the chair, a smirk playing on his lips. Beside him sat a woman with long hair and a bright dress, the same woman Olivia had once seen him with outside a restaurant. That sight had burned into her memory, and now, seeing her again, it felt like someone had twisted the knife deeper into her heart. Alexander looked at Olivia and leaned closer to whisper something into the other woman's ear. She laughed softly, covering her mouth. The sound pierced Olivia's chest. He was doing this on purpose, she thought. He wanted to show her that he had moved on, that she was no longer important. Her lawyer, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, leaned toward Olivia. "Stay calm," she whispered. "We'll fight this the right way. Don't let his game shake you." Olivia nodded, though inside her heart was raging. When the court session began, the judge looked at both parties with a stern face. Alexander's lawyer stood and began to speak. His voice was smooth, calculated. He painted a picture of Alexander as a loving father who only wanted stability for his children, and Olivia as a mother too absorbed in her career, too busy to care for them properly. Olivia sat frozen, her nails digging into her palms. Every word felt like poison, but she forced herself to remain quiet. When it was her lawyer's turn, she stood and calmly explained Olivia's dedication as a mother. She reminded the court of the nights Olivia stayed awake to care for her sick children, of the sacrifices she made to provide them with education and safety. But Olivia could see from the corner of her eye Alexander was smiling, confident, as if he already knew the outcome. After hours of arguments, the judge declared temporary custody would remain with Alexander until further hearings. Olivia's heart sank. She wanted to scream, to protest, but her lawyer placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "This is only the beginning," she whispered. "We will appeal. Don't give up." Olivia walked out of the courthouse with trembling legs. The world outside looked blurry, the cars, the people, everything moving fast while she stood still. The sky was cloudy, as if it carried her sorrow. That evening, she sat alone again. The apartment felt emptier than before. She picked up her phone and opened her gallery, scrolling through pictures of her children. Their smiling faces, their messy hair, their innocent eyes, every picture stabbed her heart. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she wiped them quickly. She would not stay broken. She remembered something her mother once told her. The most dangerous woman is the one who has been betrayed but refuses to stay silent. And Olivia knew this fight was far from over. The next few days she kept her distance, quietly observing Alexander. She hired a private investigator, something she never thought she would do. She needed proof, something solid that could turn the custody case in her favor. Nights turned into weeks, and slowly the pieces of Alexander's life began to unfold before her. The investigator showed her photographs, Alexander dining at fancy restaurants, not just with the woman Olivia had seen before, but with different women. Some nights he was at bars, other nights at hotels. The images burned Olivia's eyes. The man who claimed she was unfit to be a mother was wasting his life chasing pleasure. One photograph in particular struck her deeply. Alexander walking hand in hand with the woman outside the children's school. Her children were right there, holding their father's other hand, smiling innocently. And Alexander had introduced them to her. Rage filled Olivia's veins. How dare he? How dare he expose her children to his lies, to a stranger, while trying to take them away from their own mother? That night Olivia couldn't sleep. She walked back and forth across her apartment, her mind racing. Every sound of the city outside, the honk of cars, the hum of the streetlights faded into the background. Only one thought consumed her: revenge. She would not let Alexander play with her life anymore. She would not let him poison her children's hearts against her. The next morning, Olivia started building her case carefully. She gathered records of Alexander's financial irresponsibility, proof of his reckless nights, witnesses who had seen him drunk. She worked with her lawyer day and night, preparing every detail. She also began spending more time with her children during supervised visits, making sure they felt her love. Alexander, on the other hand, believed he was untouchable. He continued flaunting his new life, attending parties, showing off his new partner, and acting as though Olivia was no longer in the picture. But he didn't know what was coming. One rainy evening, Olivia followed Alexander quietly after a supervised visit. She stayed in her car at a distance, her hands tight on the steering wheel. He parked outside a luxurious apartment and entered with the woman by his side. Lights turned on inside, and Olivia could see them laughing together, pouring wine. She felt her chest tighten, her breath uneven. The investigator had been right. Alexander wasn't the responsible father he pretended to be. He was living a double life. As she sat there in the rain, watching from her car, she whispered to herself, "You think you've won, Alexander, but you've underestimated me. You have no idea what I'm capable of." Her eyes burned with determination. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside her heart, and she knew the real battle had just begun. The next morning, Olivia woke up with heavy eyes but a sharper mind. She brewed black coffee, sat by the window, and opened her notebook. Every page already had notes, timelines, and evidence she had collected against Alexander. But today, she added something new. She started writing a letter not to Alexander, but to her children. She wanted them to know the truth one day, when they were old enough to understand. She wrote about how much she loved them, how she fought for them, how she endured the darkest nights for their sake. She wrote with tears streaming down her face, but her hand did not stop. She would keep the letter safe, hidden until the right moment. Later that day, she went to her lawyer's office. The investigator was already there, laying out fresh photographs on the table. Alexander, drunk in a nightclub. Alexander kissing another woman at a rooftop bar. Alexander stumbling out of a hotel at dawn. Olivia's stomach turned, but she stayed strong. This was not pain anymore, it was fuel. Her lawyer leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "This," she said firmly, pointing at the pictures, is enough to shake his image in front of the court. But we need more. If we push for full custody, we must prove he's not only irresponsible but dangerous for the children. Olivia's voice was steady. Then we'll get more. That evening, she arranged another meeting with the investigator. She wanted surveillance around Alexander's apartment, his workplace, everywhere he went. She didn't care how much it cost. Every penny she earned would now go into this battle. Days passed and more truth unraveled. Alexander was deep in debt. He had borrowed money to maintain his flashy lifestyle, gambling it away in poker games. He was hiding it from the court, from his lawyer, from everyone. Olivia's chest tightened when she saw the receipts and records. She could already see how the judge would look at him once this was revealed. One afternoon, during a supervised visit with her children, her daughter clung to her hand longer than usual. "Mommy," she whispered, "Daddy says you don't have time for us." "Is that true?" Olivia's throat tightened, but she forced a gentle smile. "Sweetheart, that's not true. Mommy loves you more than anything. I work hard so you can have a safe life. But never forget, you are always the center of my heart." Her daughter nodded softly, but Olivia's heart broke inside. Alexander was already poisoning their minds. That made her resolve even harder. The next court hearing came 2 weeks later. The courtroom was tense. Olivia sat tall, her black suit crisp, her expression unreadable. Alexander entered, wearing a confident smile. The woman was with him again, sitting in the gallery like a queen who had already won. The session began. Alexander's lawyer tried the same arguments again, painting him as a stable, loving father. But this time Olivia's lawyer stood with sharper weapons. She placed photographs, receipts, and financial records on the judge's desk. Each piece of paper was a bullet, each photograph a strike. The judge raised his eyebrows, his face growing stern. "Mr. Alexander, can you explain these expenses? These frequent nights at bars, hotels, and gambling establishments?" For the first time, Alexander's smile faltered. He tried to speak smoothly, but his voice cracked. His lawyer objected, tried to twist the narrative, but the damage was already done. Olivia sat silently, her heart racing. She watched him struggle, the man who once controlled her life now cornered in front of everyone. She wanted to cry, to laugh, to scream, but she remained calm, letting the truth speak louder than her emotions. When the hearing ended, no final decision was given yet. But Olivia could see it in Alexander's eyes as he walked out of the courtroom. His arrogance was shaking. His confidence was slipping. And that was only the beginning. Outside the courthouse, Alexander confronted her. He grabbed her arm tightly, his eyes burning. "You think you're smart? You think you can destroy me?" he hissed. Olivia yanked her arm free, her voice cold. "I don't need to destroy you, Alexander. You're already doing it yourself. I'm just showing the world who you really are." For a moment, he froze. Then he laughed bitterly. "You'll regret this, Olivia. I swear you will." She looked him in the eyes, calm and fearless. "No, Alexander. The only regret here is yours for betraying the wrong woman." He stormed away, but Olivia stood still, her breath heavy. The war was no longer hidden. It was out in the open, burning brighter than ever. That night, Olivia returned to her apartment. She turned off all the lights and sat by the window, watching the city glow. Somewhere out there, Alexander was celebrating with another drink, another woman, pretending to be untouchable. But he had no idea how close he was to falling apart. The storm inside Olivia was no longer pain. It was fire. A fire that would burn until justice was hers. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "This is not just about revenge anymore. This is about my children. And for them, I will fight until the end." The night stretched long, but Olivia didn't feel tired. Her mind kept replaying Alexander's face in court, the cracks in his confidence, the way his voice trembled. She wanted more of that. She wanted him completely undone, stripped of the mask he wore in public. Her phone buzzed. It was the investigator again. He had more photographs, more evidence. Olivia's pulse quickened as she opened the files. And what she saw made her chest tighten in both anger and relief. Alexander was not only gambling, he was also meeting shady people late at night, exchanging money in dark corners. Debt collectors. Dangerous men. Olivia leaned back in her chair, her hands trembling slightly. This was it. The proof she needed. Not just irresponsibility, but danger. This could end everything for him. And as the rain tapped against the window, she smiled faintly for the first time in weeks. The game had shifted. Alexander thought he had taken her children, her peace, her dignity. But he had underestimated her, because now Olivia had everything she needed to bring him to his knees. The third court session was scheduled on a Monday morning, and Olivia barely slept the night before. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing every possible scenario. What if the judge leaned in Alexander's favor again? What if her lawyer wasn't able to convince them? What if she lost the children for good? Her chest tightened at the thought, but then she remembered the photographs. She remembered the receipts, the bank records, and now the new evidence of Alexander meeting dangerous men. It wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was a threat to the safety of her children. That thought gave her strength. She dressed carefully that morning. A dark blue suit, her hair tied back, minimal makeup. She wanted to look like what she truly was, a strong, responsible mother. Not broken. Not weak. Just determined. When she entered the courtroom, she saw Alexander already seated. His expensive suit looked crisp, but his face was pale. He was trying to smile, to keep up his charm, but Olivia could see the cracks. His hands trembled slightly when he adjusted his tie. His arrogance was slipping. The hearing began. Alexander's lawyer stood first, trying to paint a perfect picture. Your Honor, my client has been a devoted father. He provides financial stability. He spends time with his children, and he has no criminal record. He simply wishes for the best upbringing for them. Olivia kept her eyes on the judge. She didn't react, didn't blink. Then her lawyer stood, her voice calm but sharp like a blade. Your Honor, with all due respect, we have reason to believe the children are not safe under Mr. Alexander's care. We present Exhibit F financial records proving extensive gambling debts. She placed the documents in front of the judge. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Alexander shifted uncomfortably. Exhibit B, her lawyer continued. Photographic evidence of Mr. Alexander frequenting bars, nightclubs, and hotels, often accompanied by women who are not his wife. More murmurs. Alexander's face turned red. And finally, Exhibit C records of meetings with known debt collectors, men involved in illegal lending practices. The judge's expression grew darker with every passing minute. He adjusted his glasses and turned to Alexander. Mr. Alexander, can you explain these findings? Alexander cleared his throat. Your Honor, I admit I made mistakes, but they don't affect my ability to care for my children. My personal life is separate. My children love me. I love them. His lawyer tried to add, Your Honor, financial issues do not define one's parenting ability. We must focus on what is in the children's best interest. Olivia's lawyer did not back down. Exactly. And what's best for the children is a stable environment, free of gambling debts, free of late-night drinking, and free of dangerous associations. My client Olivia may work long hours, but she works honorably. She provides structure, education, and above all, safety. The judge leaned back, silent for a moment. The courtroom was tense, every breath heavy. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her face calm. Finally, the judge spoke. I will need more time before giving a final ruling. But Mr. Alexander, I strongly advise you to reflect on your actions. This court prioritizes the well-being of the children above all. The gavel hit. The hearing was over. As everyone stood to leave, Alexander's mask shattered. He stormed out, his face twisted in anger. Olivia walked calmly, but inside her chest, her heart was racing. She wasn't victorious yet, but she was closer. Outside in the cold air, Alexander approached her again. This time his smile was gone completely. His voice was low, threatening. "You think you can take them from me? You'll never win, Olivia. I'll drag you down with me." Olivia met his gaze, fearless. "You don't need to drag me, Alexander. You're already sinking. And when you drown, you'll drown alone." His jaw tightened. For a second, Olivia thought he might strike her, but instead, he turned and walked away, muttering curses under his breath. That night, Olivia sat by her window again, city lights flickering in the distance. She thought about her children's faces, their laughter, their innocent questions. She remembered her daughter's words. "Daddy says you don't have time for us." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I'll show them the truth," she whispered. "I'll show them who really fought for them." Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the investigator. More evidence. Alexander had been caught transferring money secretly, trying to hide assets before the court could freeze them. Olivia exhaled slowly, clutching the phone tighter. Piece by piece, Alexander was building his own downfall, and Olivia would be there to make sure he fell completely. Sometimes life has a way of stripping a man layer by layer until nothing is left but his truth. And Alexander's truth was beginning to show in the ugliest form possible. The weeks after the third hearing were like a storm building behind closed doors. Olivia could feel it. Every day brought a new revelation, a new piece of evidence, and a new sign that Alexander's perfect mask was shattering. Late one night, Olivia received another call from her investigator. His voice was calm but serious. "We've traced Alexander's movements again. He has been visiting a small gambling den downtown. Not the fancy casinos, but the dangerous ones. The kind where debts don't just disappear, they follow you home." Olivia closed her eyes, pressing her forehead against the cold window. "And the children? Were they with him?" "No," the man reassured. "He goes alone." "But Olivia, this is dangerous. If he keeps losing money there, people will come after him. And if your children are with him when that happens." His voice trailed off. Her stomach tightened. She pictured her son, clutching Alexander's hand, frightened as rough men approached. She couldn't let it happen. She wouldn't. The very next morning, Olivia's lawyer filed an emergency petition. The evidence was growing stronger, undeniable now. Financial collapse, secret accounts, dangerous company. Slowly, the court's patience with Alexander was running out. But Alexander wasn't going down quietly. He became more reckless, more desperate. He began calling Olivia late at night, his voice dripping with venom. "You think you're winning, don't you?" He hissed over the phone one evening. "You think the court is on your side. But remember this, Olivia. Those children love me. They'll never forgive you for tearing us apart. You'll end up alone, hated by the very ones you're fighting for." Olivia's hands trembled around the phone, but her voice came out steady. "Better they hate me for saving them than love you for destroying them." She hung up before he could reply. Behind his threats, Olivia could hear something else: fear. The fear of a man watching his empire collapse, knowing the walls were closing in. One evening, Olivia's investigator sent her a set of photographs that made her heart race. They showed Alexander at a restaurant, sitting across from a woman. His face leaned close to hers, his hand touching hers on the table. He looked relaxed, almost happy, as if the chaos of the courtroom didn't exist. Olivia stared at the images for a long time. Part of her wanted to scream. Part of her wanted to laugh. Here he was, fighting for custody, pretending to be the perfect father, while sitting with another woman as if their marriage had meant nothing. But then, Olivia realized something. This wasn't just betrayal. It was more proof, more evidence of his double life. The next court date arrived. Olivia walked in with her head high. Alexander looked tired now, his charm fading, dark circles under his eyes. His lawyer whispered to him frantically, but Alexander barely nodded. The judge entered, the room silenced. Papers shuffled. The hearing began. Olivia's lawyer stood tall. "Your Honor, we present new evidence today. Mr. Alexander has continued to gamble, despite his claims of responsibility. We also have photographic evidence of his involvement with women outside his marriage, while simultaneously claiming moral superiority as a parent. Lastly, records show Mr. Alexander attempting to conceal assets, which is a direct violation of court orders." The judge raised an eyebrow, turning toward Alexander. "Mr. Alexander, these are serious accusations. Do you deny them?" Alexander's voice cracked slightly as he spoke. I may have made mistakes, Your Honor, but these mistakes don't define me as a father. I provide for my children. They love me. That should matter more than any of this." The judge's tone grew sharp. "Providing is not just about money, Mr. Alexander. It is about stability, trust, and safety. If you cannot offer these, then this court must reconsider custody arrangements." Alexander's face twisted with frustration. He slammed his hand on the table, startling everyone. "She's lying. She's turning you all against me." The judge's gavel came down hard. "Control yourself, Mr. Alexander. This is a courtroom, not a playground for outbursts." Olivia sat still, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply watched as the man who once controlled her world slowly lost control of his own. After the session, as people filed out, Alexander glared at her. His eyes burned with hatred. "This isn't over," he whispered. "You'll regret this, Olivia. I swear you will." But Olivia didn't flinch. She leaned in close enough for only him to hear. "No, Alexander. You'll regret underestimating me." That night, news broke. Alexander had been arrested caught in a violent altercation at the gambling den. The police found drugs on the premises, illegal transactions, and Alexander in the middle of it all. When Olivia heard, she sat in silence for a long time. Not joy, not sorrow. Just relief. Her children were asleep in the next room, their breaths soft, innocent. She looked at them and whispered, "It's almost over. I promise." But deep inside, she knew one thing. Men like Alexander didn't give up easily. Even behind bars, he would find a way to claw, to fight, to destroy. And Olivia would have to be ready for the final strike. He was arrested slowly, the way a man sinks into quicksand. Not with a single dramatic shout, but with the steady failures of every lie and every secret finally catching up to him. At first the arrest felt unreal to Olivia. She had watched him stumble and rage and threaten. She had watched him try to hide money, chase women, and gamble nights away. She had gathered photographs, receipts, witness statements, bank records, and a careful trail the private investigator had left for the judge to follow. But seeing officers lead the man who once kissed her goodnight out of his home with his hands cuffed was a moment that cut through even her hard resolve. The news spread fast. The local papers published short, clean lines at first. Local businessman detained in fraud. Probe. Then the story lengthened into headlines. Father arrested amid custody and fraud. Investigation. People in the neighborhood who had once whispered pity at Alexander's struggles now whispered a different word: scandal. Colleagues who had stood by him at dinner parties moved their chairs a little farther away when they saw him. The life he had built with so much careful charm began to flake like old paint. At the police station, the charge sheet was methodical. The state prosecutor's team had worked in quiet behind the scenes. Fraud through concealed assets. Attempted embezzlement of family funds. Illegal transfers. Harassment. Threats against his spouse during the custody battle. The private investigator's photos were attached. The bank statements matched the hotel bills. There were the recorded calls to an audio clip captured secretly by Olivia, where Alexander's voice had been low and cruel as he threatened her. That recording was a blow the prosecutors liked because it was direct, evidence of intent to intimidate. Alexander's first court appearance was procedural, but the look on his face was not. He had expected to throw money at lawyers to smooth the scene over with charm. He had expected to plead ignorance, to say he had made mistakes under stress. But the magistrate looked at him, plainly as if reading each of his public masks like pages of a thin book. The magistrate ordered him remanded pending a more formal hearing. Bail was set, then revoked after the prosecution argued convincingly that Alexander posed a risk. He had made threats. He had shown instability. He had ties to people who might intimidate witnesses. In court, the judge said only what needed to be said. The safety of the children and of the witnesses came first. Olivia walked out of the courtroom, holding on to nothing but a small paper with the new dates scrawled on it. She did not feel victorious so much as relieved. The man who had tried to seize her children was now in a place where his reach was limited, at least for now. She thought of the nights her children had cried for her, and the nights she had went back to work to make things right. This moment was not an ending yet, but it was a turn. The prosecutors worked slowly and carefully. They could not rush. A criminal conviction required more than rage. It required law and fact, chain and proof. That suited Olivia. She had been precise in the way she gathered evidence. She sat with the prosecutor on a small chairs in a cold room one afternoon. "We need witnesses who can speak to his Patterns Hotel staff, the bartender who saw him at 2 in the morning, the woman who was loaned money, people who can verify the transfers," the prosecutor said. Olivia nodded. She handed over the phone records, the third set of hotel receipts, bank screenshots, the private investigator's anonymous envelope of names and numbers. She felt oddly calm in that meeting. She had turned her sorrow into a file cabinet of truth. The criminal process moved to pre-trial investigations. The defense tried to spin. They accused the private investigator of entrapment. They quibbled over dates and times. But there were CCTV images of Alexander entering a suite. There were credit card transactions that matched the hotel, bills and the gifts he had bought. There were witnesses who confirmed he had met dangerous, high-stakes individuals about unpaid debts. And then there was the tape, his voice, low and frightening, threatening Olivia if she did not back off. That recording was damning in a way the carefully written statements were not. It showed intent. It showed malice. Still, the defense fought. They called Alexander's accountant, tried to show the transfers as personal investments or loans made in private. They accused Olivia of manufacturing evidence to win custody. The lawyers circled each other like wary animals. Olivia did not watch every stage. She chose to protect her energy. When the defense began to speak of her work schedule and how it might have affected the children, she reminded herself why she had begun this. Not to hurt a man she had once loved, but to protect 2 little lives from being buffeted by lies and danger. Pre-trial hearings lasted. The judge listened to both sides. The prosecutor requested that the custody arrangement be reevaluated in light of the criminal charges. The family court rearranged elements of what the civil custody hearings had decided, but now with criminal evidence in play. The children were kept away from court to protect them. No child testimony, no direct pressure. Instead, a psychologist's report and teacher statements came forward, describing small changes in the children's behavior that could be linked to stress. That was enough to make the judge pay closer attention. In the weeks that followed, Alexander's bravado cooled into something else: panic and attempts at control. He tried to reach out to neighbors who had given statements, to beg them to reconsider, to act contrite in a way that his old self would have perfected. But those gestures looked small and sudden against a pile of receipts and pictures. More damaging was a short video that surfaced in Discovery. At a gambling den, Alexander had been loud and aggressive, arguing with men about money. Someone had filmed it on a shaky phone and sent it to the prosecution. His voice was rough, his face red. Even his lawyer, watching it in a sterile room with the criminal team, said softly, "This doesn't help." A week before the trial, in a small hearing to decide on temporary protective measures, the judge granted Olivia a number of things: full primary custody of the children, supervised visitation only after a period of demonstrated rehabilitation, and a restraining order that forbade Alexander from contacting Olivia directly in any way. The judge's decision was based on the mounting evidence and the clear risk to the children's well-being. It was not punitive as much as it was protective. For Olivia, it felt like the law finally recognizing the danger she had been living inside. When the criminal trial began, the gallery filled with more people than either side expected. The media present watched with polite pens. The prosecution set out its case deliberately. They started with the financial, trailed the transfers into accounts controlled by a third party, the sudden purchases 3 nights in a row, the attempts to hide a portfolio under another name. Next came witness testimony. The private investigator, careful but firm, testified to seeing Alexander enter hotel rooms with women, to his late-night runs to the gambling den. A hotel manager spoke of a man using a false name. A bartender testified to Alexander's aggressive behavior over unpaid tabs. Each witness chipped away at the public mask of Alexander's life. Then came the recording. Olivia's lawyer had expected this to be the emotional fulcrum of the case, but the prosecution played it with a strict calm. The tape's low hum filled the courtroom. Alexander's words with a threatening edge, the promises of damage if Olivia went forward. The sound made listeners lean forward. The judge frowned. The defense objected, saying it was illegally obtained, but after a brief hearing, the judge allowed it because it directly supported charges of intimidation and threat. Alexander took the stand later, and he looked smaller there than he had in photographs. He tried to explain, he offered apologies. He said he had been under stress, he called it a lapse. He said he loved his children and claimed the funds were misreported or misinterpreted. His voice shook through parts of his testimony, but there was something else too, no full ownership of the harm. He did not say, "I was wrong and I will make it right." He said, "I made mistakes." The distinction was notable to jurors, to the judge, to anyone listening. The prosecution's closing was careful and plain. They did not use theatrical language. They pointed line by line at the money trail, the transfers, the hotel receipts, the witnesses' accounts. They pointed to the recorded threat and to the concerns for the children's safety. The defense argued that Alexander was being punished for a private life and that Olivia had blurred lines between personal pain and criminality. The jury retired to consider. While the jury deliberated, the court calendar had other entries. The family court scheduled a final custody hearing to cement arrangements while the criminal matter proceeded. Olivia attended, exhausted but steady. Her lawyer presented everything: the criminal allegations, the recorded threats, the financial documents, the psychologist's notes on the children. The judge listened and took a long time before speaking. Then, in a voice that carried the weight of something final, he said, "Given the evidence and the clear risk of harm, I am awarding full custody to Miss Olivia. Mr. Alexander will have no unsupervised visitation until he can demonstrate stability and completion of recommended programs. These measures are for the children's best interest." Ruling had the clean sound of a line being drawn. When the criminal verdict returned, it felt for Olivia like the last stone dropped into a well. The jury found Alexander guilty on several counts: financial fraud related to concealment of assets and transfers, and on at least one count of intimidation tied to the recorded threat. The judge scheduled sentencing. Through it all, Alexander sat with a different face. No charm, no smoothness. Only the thin line of panic that comes when a man sees a prison service number, and chooses, in a flash, the shape of his future. Sentencing day arrived like a raw weather. Media lined the street like a low tide of curious faces. Olivia wore plain clothes, her hair pulled back, no dramatic gestures. She read a statement in court. She spoke about the children, about the nights they were afraid, about how small human beings can come to count each hour of absence like a measurement of love. She spoke of the fear she had held in her body for the months when Alexander had been reckless and violent in language. She did not triumphantly list his crimes. She told the judge what mattered, that a family had been broken by someone who chose his pleasure and his lies over the safety of his children. Her voice never rose into fury. It steadied into a plea that the punishment protect her children and deter similar behavior. Alexander's lawyer tried to argue for leniency. He spoke of a man under stress, a man who had once contributed. The judge listened and then spoke slowly. He pointed to the facts, the concealment of assets, the transfers to hide funds, the recorded threats. He spoke of the children and the danger that gambling, debt, and violent associations posed. He spoke of the phone calls and the rooftop videos, and the nights that should have been for two little people to have one safe bed and one reliable parent. The judge's words were neither cruel nor lenient. They were practical. In the end, the sentence given was 3 years in a state facility, a length meant to be long enough to remove the immediate danger and to allow for rehabilitation programs, including financial management and anger counseling. When the prison van took Alexander away, he looked small. His face, before composed for the public, showed defeat in a way she had never seen. He looked at Olivia, and for a second, only a second, there was something like shame. Then the doors closed. He was gone, months gone. The children's education continued. Olivia changed jobs slightly to allow more time for home, shifting responsibilities and leaning on trusted colleagues. She initialized small rituals that healed: Saturday pancakes, a walk in the park to watch the pigeons glide, an evening read aloud where she made goofy voices for silly characters. The little things built safety. The children began to sleep more deeply. Laughter returned, careful and bright. Emma started piano lessons again. Noah joined a soccer team. They were children becoming whole. Sometimes, Olivia felt the old pain like a pale bruise out of sight, but tender if touched. She had nights where she sat with the sentence and the way it had unfolded and wondered about the life that had once been. But then she looked at her children and she knew this sentence was more than punishment. It was a containment. It meant the man who had threatened and hidden and gambled was off the streets for a time. The children's future had been rescued from one course. That knowledge was not a joy that demanded celebration. It was relief that asked for quiet gratitude. Years later, when she looked back, Olivia would not say she had been vindictive. She would say she had been clear. She had turned truth into protection. The man who had once been her husband would serve his time, compelled to think and to learn, to be boxed in the legal consequences of his choices. Her children had a life that belonged to them again. She sometimes walked past the courthouse and felt a complex mix of feelings: grief for the marriage that failed, a grim approval for the system that had intervened, and gratitude for having found the strength to make the truth visible. Life did not become perfect, but the danger that had swelled like a storm around her family had passed. Olivia rebuilt slowly. She went back to work in a different role with more balance. She learned ways to say no without guilt. She insisted on being present, not perfect. Her children grew in safe spaces and made new friends. And sometimes, on late nights when the city was quiet, she sat down and actually felt light. Not unburdened, never that, but steady. The sentence was over. The children were hers. The man who had betrayed them was in a cell, and there was finally room in the world for healing.